If you've downloaded the Plus package, or maybe you're messing with one of the retitle packages that you received, and you want to jump into After Effects and tweak some of the text, I'm going to walk you through how to do that as easy as I can to get you on your way. So you should have opened up the zip file. If so, then you should see these folders here. Before you open up any project files, be sure that you do install the fonts. You can find the tutorial on how to do that on the tutorials page, but basically you just go in here, open up this help file, click on these font links, and then download those and install them on your computer. But there's a tutorial on how to do that exactly. So let's go into the project files folder, go into After Effects, and I'm going to open up the version that I'm using currently, which is 2017, but most projects will go all the way back to CS6, but for now I'm going to open up 2017. All of the After Effects project files that are on Pixel Preacher are all built very similar in the fact that their structure is all the same. So what you should see are 4 folders over here. You have an assets folder, and this is really containing all the pieces that make up the project. So maybe textures or pre-comps or audio, all the little pieces that make up the project. So for the most part, we're really going to ignore this folder. If you know what you're doing in After Effects, you're welcome to explore this a little bit, but we will stay out of this for the most part. Then you have the final render folder, and in here is what you're looking at right here, and this is what is going to be your final export outside of After Effects. You should have 2 layers down here. You have the working compositions layer, which is really the nuts and bolts of the project, and then your audio, and then you have these little brackets here, and these brackets are determining what is going to be exported. So wherever those are is what will be your final output. Now we also have a text folder here. This is where we're going to spend most of our time today, is talking about how to adjust text inside of your projects. So we'll open up that and take a look at all these pre-comps. The other folder is the working composition folder, and this is kind of the nuts and bolts of the project, like I said. This is where a lot of the projects will differ in the fact that every designer is different and they're going to design differently and build their projects differently. But if all you're really doing is editing the text, then you shouldn't have to worry about these too much. So we won't go into these really at all. So I'm going to close this up. So now, first let's talk about how to edit the text that is inside the bumper that is not the logo. So I'm going to kind of scroll through this project and see some of the text come up. So here you can see I have 10 different pre-comps, and these little symbols here means that it's a pre-comp. 10 different pre-comps of text that I can change. So I'm going to look at this first slide here and think, okay, what do I want this to say? So I can go into the text 1 folder, and the first word is going to be "it's inevitable," and it's different because they kind of slide up at different times. And I'm not going to go into the details of this particular project, but just going to talk about how to edit the text. So again, I'll go to text 1, and this is a lot like Photoshop in the fact that all you really do is select your text tool, click, and edit. So we don't want to move the text around too much. You may have some very minimal animation happening on this layer. If so, just scroll to where it's nice and still, and then you can change your text. So I'm going to click on my text tool up here in the panel, and then I can click on this text here, and I can change this to whatever I want it to be. It's totally up to you and what your text wants to be. Just be sure that it can be quickly read, and that it's not a ton of text to fill up the screen. So I'm going to go back to my final render, and now that text should have updated right there, and you can see it right there. So then I can go to my next line, which is "at some point." So whatever the text is that follows the one you just edited should be the next one, which is text 2, and you can see "at some point" right here. So maybe I want to change this to say "eventually." Okay. And now if I go back to my final render, you can see that it updates right away. Maybe I want to move that text around a little bit, and you can definitely do that. I would recommend moving it through the text box because some text layers may have some animation on it, and you don't want to mess that up by moving the text around and changing some of the positions. So what I'm going to do is just change the placement and size of this text box. So I'm going to click on the text with my text tool. I get this bounding box, and I'm going to click and then move my text over a little bit here. So if I go back to the final render, I can see that it updates, and it's pretty close. So maybe I want to go a little bit further, and I'll move that over to try and fit that spot. That works right there. So that's really how you would change the text inside of After Effects, is going through these layers and adjusting it as you go. Really they should all be about the same. If you run into any issues, there may be a custom tutorial on your project to check out. If not, shoot us a message and we'll be sure to help you out. So the next part is a little bit tricky in the fact of updating the actual logo. So I'm going to go into the logo text folder here, and I'm going to open up, actually, you know what, let's go to the very end of the project. So right here. So now I can see what happens. All right. So there's a couple ways that this can be done. You can, if you're updating also your Photoshop file, if you update that Photoshop file, it's probably going to update this After Effects file if those layers are linked. And that's not always the case. Sometimes you will change this directly in After Effects, or sometimes both. You have both options. In this case, we'll have both options, so we can go through exactly how to do each step. So again, I opened up went all the way down to the end of the projects where I can see the logo. I could probably even go into some of these projects here, go into this Scene 6 logo, which is right here. Now I can see it in real time and see how it updates as we move on. All right, so there's a couple ways I'm going to do it. I'm going to go into my logo folder, and let's first talk about how to edit it just in After Effects. I'm going to click on Better, and you can see in this project I have a Photoshop file as well as a text file. So I'm just going to turn this Photoshop file off for now. I'm going to turn this text layer on, and it's pretty much exactly the same, so I can change this to whatever I want, and then I can go back to the Scene 6 logo, and it updates right away, and that looks just like the actual logo. So that's one way to do it. Or I can even go into some of these other ones. So if I want this to say till, if I was going to change it to say till death do us part, I can turn off my Photoshop layer, which is right here, by clicking that little eyeball, and then I can turn on the text layer by clicking on the other eyeball, and I can change this text by going in and typing it in, and it updates right there. I won't go into some of these specifics as far as changing some of these layers around and making these boxes smaller. That's covered probably on the customs tutorial, or you can find that on the basics of After Effects tutorial. So that's one way to do it. Now, if you want to do it all in one fell swoop through Photoshop, we can do that as well. So I'm going to back up a little bit. I'm going to turn these back on. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my Scene 6. Everything is back to normal. So this project is linked to the Photoshop file that is also included in your project. So one way to get to it is just opening up that Photoshop file, making the tweaks and saving, or we can go into these layers themselves. So I'm going to go click on Better. I'm going to click on this Better layer right here, and then I can right click and I can go to Reveal in Finder, which is right here. It pops up this little PSD, so I'm going to double click on that. All right, so any changes that I'm making here, when I hit save, it is going to update everything inside of After Effects, which makes it pretty nice. It kind of does, kills two birds with one stone. So let me show you how to do that. Now, we already covered a little bit how to change the text inside of the brand. If you need some updating on that or a refresher, then check out that tutorial, but I'm just going to do it really quickly. I'm going to make this say till death do us part. By clicking on these layers. And this one's going to say do us. I'm even going to change this rectangle. I'm going to hit A on the keyboard and click on these little corners, move them over here. Okay, and then I need to change the worst to say part. And we'll just leave the tagline as is. So now when I hit save, it's going to update straight in After Effects. So I'm going to hit save. We go back to After Effects, and you can watch it update right there. And that looks pretty good. Sometimes maybe some layers won't quite work out like they should, so we can go into Photoshop or into After Effects and tweak them on our own a little bit. So you can see that the do us box and the till box aren't quite right. So I'm just going to go in, I'm going to find those layers. You can go in here and we can tweak these a little bit. So maybe this one's a little bit too big. So I'm going to squeeze that down some. And again, I'm not going to go over how to do this exactly all in detail right now. We can check out that basics of After Effects inside of our tutorials. tutorials page to learn a little bit more. But I'm just going to make these a little bit bigger. Okay, so that does it right there. So you can see that that was kind of all happens at once and updates it pretty seemingly. So let's go back to the final render. Maybe you have changed your text, everything feels really good, you've changed your logo, but you want to change the music. Now you can go into the audio pre-comp by clicking on that final render timeline here. We can double click on the audio, and inside of here you're going to have the music layer as well as a sound effects layer. So you can single those out. Maybe you like the sound effects, but you want to change the music. You can just add your own music, turn this off, drag in your music layer in here, and then go back to final render and render out the project right there. Very simple. Or you can turn off the sound effects, vice versa, however you want to do it. So the last step is going to be rendering out your project. All that really depends on how you want to play your video back. A lot of places have certain formats and things they need to follow, but basically you would go to composition. You can use media encoder if you want, or you can just go straight to the render queue. A lot of programs you think to go to file export, but that doesn't always work quite as well. So in here I'm going to send it to the render queue. I'm going to go to lossless. You can know our best settings, and you can change your format anywhere in here. So maybe you want to do ProRes. H.264 is really the safe bet. So I'm going to click on H.264. You can limit your data rate. This will make the file not quite as good as quality, but the file size will be a lot smaller. You can change this number to whatever you need. So just experiment with that on what you want. Hit OK. Hit OK again. I'm going to hit, and then I just tell it where I want it to save and change the name, and then I hit render and let it go. And then play it back and make sure it works well. You can test out some different codecs and some different formats to see what works well for you. So I believe that covers everything. Check out the basics of After Effects to learn a little bit more about the character panel, some effects and different layers, and how to pre-comp and all that good stuff. So thank you for checking this out. I really hope to help you out, and we will see you soon.